Hi everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. And this evening, what I'm going to talk about is sort of, listening to the previous speakers. This area that I'm going to talk about, reality and virtual reality, is kind of less defined than the other themes. It's more sort of recent in our history and society and culture. I'm going to sort of introduce what is really happening here. So we've got a young audience member who's my target market here. I'm delighted to have him here, and he might actually be able to interpret some of this for you later on. So Roblox, I'm sure this gentleman knows what Roblox is. Roblox is, I'm just using this as sort of a backdrop to understand where this generation Z, Gen Z and Alpha, so anybody between the age of about 14 to 26 is Gen Z, and pre that is in the Alpha phase. So what's happening, and suppose COVID has kind of really kind of sort of provided the petri dish for more digital and kind of sort of youngsters spending more time online. But looking at kind of these figures, first of all, it's kind of to demonstrate where this young generation are really spending a lot of time, and how potentially this time that they're spending online has kind of replaced sort of social sort of structures around their life and their friendships and companions. So looking at the first one, over 56% of Gen Z, this is a recent survey done with Roblox, says that styling their avatars, so their avatars, their digital sort of representation of themselves in a gaming environment. I have 3 kids, the youngest is 15. I've actually spent a fortune on skins, so that's kind of dressing the avatar this last number of years in Fortnite. So any parent here that has younger kids spending time in Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, etc., they're buying these cosmetics, as they're called, and skins to help their avatar operate and kind of sort of communicate and kind of stylize themselves. So what's happening here, instead of a Gen Z having an idea of how they want to look in the physical world, their avatars kind of informing and inspiring how they're going to look. So that kind of back to front approach. And then also Gen Z say that their physical style, so what they decide to wear kind of socially in the physical sense, is inspired by their avatar style. And then I suppose importantly, this last slide here to the left, once a Gen Z try or wear a popular brand item on their avatar, this is sort of the sort of genesis of actually the kind of purchase point. And this is where brands are kind of really moving into virtual realms and gaming to sell digital assets and potentially redeem them into physical assets. So these games, such as Minecraft, Fortnite and Roblox, have become virtual gathering places for young people to play out, but also to play, but also to hang out. So this virtual reality that they are now spending so much time in has kind of replaced hanging out socially in the arcades when you're in the 80s or 90s, or going to a social club, picking up a phone and having 10 hours conversation with your girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever it might be back in the day. So it really is where they are talking to their classmates, to their friends, and while they're playing the game. So this sort of passive communication that's happening in this realm. So it's so when we look at Gen Z, the brands, even these gaming platforms are looking at how do we kind of extend, not necessarily extend the time in there, but like kind of how they're going to build a culture within that gaming environment, not just to keep the gamers in there and I suppose the avatars, but also what they're doing is trying to construct a society and kind of a culture around these spaces. So the reason why I have this is a really famous Japanese artist called Yayoi Kusama, and this is what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that it's not just at Gen Z that AR and CGI are being used. They're being used in luxury brands, and this is in Japan for Louis Vuitton, a really major collaboration between a very premium luxury brand and this really well-known contemporary artist. And so what we're seeing here is kind of out-of-home advertising template, which used to be 2D, and they relied on people driving in their cars and kind of looking up, and they've got 6 seconds and it delivers a message. So out-of-home media was becoming a little bit sort of extinct in many ways, but with CGI and this kind of new sort of bringing augmented reality into the sort of out-of-home advertising landscape, we're able to make things much more interactive using all of this kind of newer technology. So for a luxury brand spending and a very serious artist converging together, this ad is not for the Gen Z, it is actually for people like us. And this is where this sort of aesthetic is permeating now. We've got these digital worlds that our sons and daughters and nieces, nephews are playing in, but also this is inspiring how we're actually seeing the world around us. We're being reminded that there is this interplay between digital, unreal, and physical. If we look at, it'll take a while to load, but the Sphere in Las Vegas. So I thought this was a really, there's no sound on this, but I kind of thought this was a really, for me it was kind of the first sort of mass adoption of its popular culture. It's got this incredible experience for its a huge crowd who are really there to see a band play, but the band are going beyond just the music and that sensory stimulation of sound and singing, and kind of bring this sort of more immersive experience to the audience in this auditorium. I'm actually missing a slide back there, sorry, let me just have a look here. So this is this sound with this. So that is a design group called Artifact, and they're based in Paris, and they were bought by, I'm sure you can recognize the brand Nike. So Artifact kind of create these sort of this clone culture. You can see that this out-of-home augmented reality CGI experience that they're offering in the middle of Tokyo is selling, but it's also looking at that kind of gaming environment and kind of making it more mainstream, just kind of seeping into the psyche of how we're now looking at goods. Everything being digitally created. There isn't one physical asset there to look and examine, but we're looking at the brand in a totally different way, and you can see how much they're able to demonstrate and articulate, I suppose, in a very short period of time. So these are kind of really sort of very, culturally they're important, but this is really kind of how advertising around us, that we're kind of starting to be drawn into this kind of newer aesthetic of advertising that is kind of more game orientated. So I suppose what I'm going to show later is really what we're working on in terms of creating this digital society. So if you've got this other realm that's kind of mixed reality, as we call it, virtual and IRL in real life, and all of these other tools and kind of software that make this sort of realm an actual experience. So CGI, which is used in film, augmented reality, and then we have all of these kind of tools around creating sort of meta-humans, as they're called, so synthetic human representations. So, like, I'm going to refer into some of the talks that I've listened to, and there's so many similarities and threads in terms of, this sort of duality that we have, a human race, and that we're almost, we're on the verge of actually creating kind of a new digital society, which may not actually look like ourselves. That seems to be the trend, that we're trying to move away from exact representation. So, Snoop Dogg, I'm sure you've all heard of him, most of you, I should say. You've heard of him, but this is where his personality is so well known, so flamboyant, and he is now not just a personality in real life, but he's able to converse and communicate into these kind of new sort of realms that are being burrowed out. Every time somebody sees something, it's kind of a new angle into talking to an audience, but also into, I suppose, kind of bringing this into more mass adoption. The area that, the VTubers, obviously in Asia, they have a very strong tradition in virtual selling, in kind of that really fast-paced, high-tempo sales technique, which now has been kind of, now we can translate that into Unreal Engine, which is a gaming kind of building platform where a lot of things are being built at the moment. We've got the rise of the virtual influencer. So here you've got Zul, who is very unattractive, but has been signed by a really major fashion modeling agency in Paris, and demands a fee of massive figures, the same as Kate Moss, for all of these activations. And this model does not exist in any form or function. It's a completely, it's not a hologram, but it is using CGI and augmented reality. And then these other kind of virtual influencers in China, which I mentioned before, very prolific. This is, I suppose, what's happening. It's this virtual reality is like an interface. If you strip everything away, that's basically what it is. And this interface, this global digital human avatar market, is reaching huge value. As you can see, some of the figures there. So when I started off my journey, the introduction, sorry, there were a few abbreviations there. I should have, but back in 2018, when augmented reality and CGI were not really mainstream, I had started off building a virtual showroom platform, and that was coming from my own experience working at London and Paris Fashion Week, kind of creating a database and kind of doing that part of the kind of order fulfillment piece was sort of tech and all the rest. But what I decided to do, there was no spatial computing at that time, unlike today. So I used to traditionally travel with a lovely model, and she would try on various different outfits for the buyers who flew into Paris just for those 6 days. So it was a really busy time getting them in and out of all these clothes and all the rest. But really our revenue relied on those 6 days being very productive for us. So when I decided to create a virtual showroom, I thought, well, why don't I put the model into an app? And it was the first time, we pre-recorded the looks. We choreographed the model, and it meant that we had a menu, just like you see there, where the buyer could be in Place de Vosges, which is the one on the right, and outside the Louvre in Paris, they can visualize the collection anywhere. But like, that's back in 2018. So this was kind of my first experience looking at avatars, looking at how do we represent human or person, or augment a silhouette in another environment. So that kind of brings me on to COLONII, because this is really what we're doing. COLONII is a platform that I have started with my co-founder, who is a fashion photographer but also an AI artist, and a lot of his work has been published. You know, it is a sort of an aesthetic that's been identified as kind of, you know, sort of the pivotal point of image making today. A lot of Nick Knight and really famous photographers have actually cited his work as very relevant in terms of this new aesthetic. So when we came together, we were drawn to each other's work, but what we wanted to do, I had already created some experiences for brands in the metaverse. So that means using a platform like Spatial or Decentraland and activating sort of events, so virtual events in these environments for brands, and that coincided with a physical event that would happen on schedule. So you're really sending out invitations to the elite buyers and press of the industry that I work in, and hoping that they're going to scan the QR code and then come in and have that experience in this metaverse space. But what was really missing, I felt, was that there was no silhouette, there was no sort of relevant being that you could have in this space. So that's ultimately what COLONII is. It's cultivating a digital society and a population of Indigenous avatars operating and transacting across social and virtual worlds. So when I say Indigenous, I mean they are not human. So there is a trend in sort of meta-human and kind of avatars to look very flat and 2D. There's also a trend to replicate a human completely. So that's kind of, it looks at, you can have a digital twin of yourself or a meta-human twin of yourself. What we did, we looked at the work that Luke had created using AI, some of his work, this is kind of blending AI, and kind of extracted the characters that we felt resonated most. We'd already tested some of these characters on different commercial campaigns, openly saying that they were AI, and there was like a really strong traction with these characters. So one of the characters, and like this is where we talk about, when we talk about folklore and we talk about lore and we talk about, you know, realms. So this is really where that kind of where our character creation and the whole idea of the game, this is where we start thinking in those terms. So Anya, for us, is the leader of COLONII. She's, you know, we literally have extracted her personality just from this one image, and each of the characters, they're kind of from this place called COLONII, but there is a communal area for all of these characters. There's 6 at the moment, and within that communal area there are pods, and those pods, each character has their own pod, and there's iconography created around each of the characters. So we're really kind of looking at giving these characters an identity, and that it isn't human, it's taken on natural form. They're not aliens either, which are very prominent in the gaming industry. They are meant to be very indigenous, is the word that we use. So when we look at Anya, what we do, we extract her, and this is, I'm going to talk over this, but this is really kind of how the process is almost like going back to getting a slab of marble and chiseling out a sculpture of a person. So, but you're using software, and you go in, you mesh, you rig up the figure, you mesh it, and you start sculpting it with all of these different tools and software tools. You start building up this character model. You apply groom, and you start layering it all up, and it's a real process, hours and hours of work, and it's kind of handed over from one person to the next, who are all excellent at what they do. Then what we've done more recently, we have to dress them as well, so you have to create clothes, and we have to create a habitat and environment. So what's happening here at this point, this is Anya. She has been re-rigged. we have applied, our characters are expressive, and that means that they are fully functional, they can speak, they can have a dialect. For Anya, initially we worked with an Icelandic voiceover artist to give Anya her voice, because it felt like the right voice and the right origin for Anya. We kind of tweaked the voice a little bit, but they started off as these characters, and then the ambition was to actually create them into much more sort of expressive characters, less 2D and more interactive, so that they can have a whole Anya persona of her own. So you can see here in the detail, this is where she becomes a meta-human, so a huge amount of work going into the actual model and project file, and then starting to work on moving her eyebrows, moving her eyes, moving her mouth. We did use some performance with that to kind of give it a sort of naturalistic feel. And we've also worked with NVIDIA AI. We have a very close relationship with them, working on their audio to face, which was a lot more work than we expected, but the results are really great. It means that a lot of people are using sort of software to just make the mouth. You've seen those apps where you can put, Whitney Houston voice to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's very funny and it's great fun, but this is going really beyond that point. Our characters, what we want them to do is to operate in this dimension, in their world, where they can articulate who they are. They have their own ready-to-wear brand that's actually shown on London Fashion Week, but they have their own environment, and that's the game environment that we're starting to work on. And again, leaning back into their folklore, which we used a little bit of ChatGPT to kind of help us with. We didn't need the help, we could have scripted it ourselves, but we decided why not? We'll just go with some of it. And it was astonishing how quickly ChatGPT could they really got the characters on the place so incredibly well. So what all of this work goes towards is this. She should load.
Welcome to Colony. I am Enya. Until today, we were suspended in animation, laying dormant in pods. The origin of these cocoon-like structures and of our existence here remains a mystery. We are discovering more about ourselves, our new habitat, how we dress and how we survive. We have been summoned. Allow me to introduce my companions. Welcome to Colony.
I'll just move her on. So you can see that it's like really high fidelity avatar creation, and that's what we're really going for. It's Gen Z, they've been living in this world for so long. They need convincing avatars and convincing interfaces for them to potentially use as their, I'm not going to say teacher or replace teacher, but they're going to be using them for various different applications inside the game and beyond the game. If they're so used to having an avatar, they're going to want something that is similar to that avatar, less human potentially, to potentially articulate other aspects of their lives. So this is kind of a combination of other sort of avatars that have not yet been made, but it is kind of looking at creating this authentic emotive character conceived between the lens of Luke's work and AI illusion. So more personal connection. They are subcultural. They are meant to be. They aren't meant to be sort of standard in any way. They're not supermodels. They're not perfect. In fact, they've got so many imperfections. They're visually appealing and they're relatable and they are expressive. We are looking at, they're multilingual as well, because all this software is now available. But also we're looking at kind of non-expressive characters. They don't have to talk, and looking at neurodiversity and how Gen Z are potentially wanting to communicate in different ways, or different behavioural changes that have emerged since COVID for this generation coming up. So these are all the characters that we've created so far. A lot of work, and we're meta-humanizing them currently, but the objective is to kind of extend the population gradually. So what happens, Anya has her world, and that is gamified. At this moment in time, her folklore is kind of around a pool party, believe it or not. Hung is much more botanical, much more kind of Asian inspired and fusion. Grace is much more South London, kind of streetwear and kind of sassy. Tom is hanging out in Phoenix Park or Clapham Common, wherever he is with all his mates, and then Femi, much more sort of arcade, sort of she's the goth, and then Leon is kind of hanging out in the clubs in Paris. So these are kind of like they're kind of initial sort of surface stories and about them, but we want to go deeper into who else is going to be part of their tribe as we grow that population, and what will their own world look like, and what can you do in there as a game, as a commercial entity. And this is just a quick sort of like synopsis of all 6. So you can see the original AI work kind of speedily in the back, and then these are the 6 characters that have been animated and dressed, but not they're Anya, who you just saw, is much more advanced now, and that's where all of these are now going. And that's basically it. I can answer all the questions.